Welcome back to ABC General Hospital Spoilers. Today we dive deep into a psychological storm brewing beneath the surface of Port Charles, where secrets stalk the shadows and obsession silently turns into strategy. The connection between Willow and Daisy, once dismissed as maternal concern or survivor's guilt, begins to transform into something far darker, and it is Michael who first senses the shift. But while Michael races to uncover the truth, Drew quietly returns with a new plan, no longer merely obsessed with control, but now desperate to bend Willow to his will, no matter the cost. It began with a feeling, an unease that crept into Michael's chest like a breath held too long. At first, he dismissed it. Willow had been through so much. Losing her sense of identity after her wedding collapsed, learning about Drew's betrayal, and wrestling with the ghosts of her choices had pushed her to the edge more than once. Michael knew she was coping in her own way. But as the days passed, he couldn't ignore the late-night disappearances, the haunted look in her eyes, and the lingering scent of fear she tried to hide. She had started vanishing during her evening walks, always returning quiet, cold, and disoriented, as if she had walked through someone else's nightmare. Michael noticed bruises she couldn't explain and lies she told too easily. Then he noticed the pattern. Each of her outings led her toward the wooded edge of town, the same place Daisy had last been seen. It wasn't coincidence anymore. Willow was following Daisy. She was following her, perhaps even protecting her. And worst of all, she was doing it without telling anyone. Willow had once believed she was strong enough to bury the past, but Daisy's disappearance shattered that illusion. She remembered the moment she had let Daisy go. The trembling hands. The look of betrayal. The unspoken promise that someday Daisy would return, not to seek comfort, but to destroy her. Now, the idea that Daisy might be lurking in the shadows of Port Charles again gnawed at her like a slow infection. So she followed. Not out of guilt, but out of fear. Fear of what Daisy might do. Fear of what Drew might be planning. And fear that if she didn't watch, protect, anticipate, everything she had rebuilt would collapse again. Meanwhile, Drew had not disappeared. He had gone underground, not just physically, but emotionally, morally, strategically. After his public humiliation and Willow's rejection, Drew had wandered the country under a different name, assembling a web of allies who owed him favors and gathering information that only a man who knew how to manipulate fear could collect. And now, Drew was back, but not as the broken man who once tried to force love from Willow. He had become colder. Sharper. Focused entirely on one thing, breaking her down until she came back to him willingly. In his twisted mind, it wasn't about revenge. It was about restoring the life that had been stolen from him, one painful piece at a time. Drew's plan was subtle. He didn't want to force Willow into his arms by threatening her. That had failed before. This time, he would make her believe he was the only one who truly understood her. He began with whispers in the press, stories about Willow's emotional instability, quietly planted by anonymous sources. Then came the anonymous gifts. A children's book that Willow had once read to Daisy. A necklace that Willow thought she had lost years ago. Each item was placed just close enough to make her feel haunted, but far enough that she couldn't prove who was behind it. And in the middle of it all, he used Daisy as the perfect ghost. Someone Willow thought she might be following, but who, in fact, was being used as bait. Michael, for all his instincts, had no evidence. But his heart screamed for him to act. He confronted Willow gently at first, but her walls went up faster than he expected. She accused him of controlling her, of treating her like a fragile victim. She insisted she was healing. But every protest, every overcompensation, only deepened Michael's suspicion. And when he discovered that Willow had recently drawn a map, one that retraced the exact route Daisy had taken on the night she vanished, he knew this wasn't just grief or curiosity. Willow was preparing for something. Maybe even planning an encounter. Carly, too, began to worry. She had always respected Willow's strength, but she saw echoes of Nellie in the way Willow's eyes would harden when confronted. Willow had been the victim, but now, Carly feared, she was becoming the hunter. The revelation came when Carly visited the old abandoned shack near the southern edge of Port Charles, the same shack that had once served as a hideout during one of Sunny's worst feuds. There, she found a scarf. Torn. Damp. Covered in faint blood. And beneath the floorboard, she found something more terrifying, a phone with encrypted messages. Messages that hinted at surveillance, warnings, and coded rendezvous points. Carly didn't know if it was Daisy's phone, or Willow's. But either way, the silence had to be broken. What no one knew yet was that Drew had planted that phone. It was part of a broader plan to confuse Willow's allies and isolate her from Michael and Carly. The more they doubted her, the more vulnerable she would become. And Drew was waiting, for the exact moment when Willow would have nowhere left to run but straight into his arms. He knew she was nearing her limit. The line between paranoia and clarity had already started to blur. And with every shadow she chased, with every whisper she followed, she inched closer to believing that only he could save her from a past she couldn't outrun. The game escalated when Willow, driven by desperation, broke into the WSB archive at the university hospital. She was searching for Daisy's original case file. But what she found instead was a redacted folder with Drew's name on it, a folder that listed experimental behavioral conditioning, unauthorized psychological trials, and a list of subjects including herself and Daisy. That was the moment the world tipped. Willow had not imagined everything. She had been manipulated before, perhaps even conditioned. And Drew had orchestrated it all, under a sanctioned yet buried program. He had been studying her. Shaping her. And now, he wanted to finish the work. Michael and Carly acted fast. They reached out to Anna, who pulled a few strings inside the WSB. The truth came in fragments. Enough to confirm their worst fears. Drew had once volunteered for a behavioral manipulation program designed to test psychological influence under stress. It had been discontinued years ago, after multiple participants suffered severe psychological regression. But Drew hadn't let it go. He had learned enough to continue the work in secret. And Willow, as someone with prior trauma and vulnerability, had been his unwitting test subject. Daisy, too, had been caught in the orbit. Their shared trauma had not been chance, it had been designed. The final confrontation came in the ruins of the old estate outside Port Charles, where Drew had lured Willow under the guise of a lead on Daisy. She arrived alone, armed only with her instincts and a desperate need for truth. Drew was waiting, calm, welcoming, as if nothing had happened. He claimed to love her. Claimed to want to help her heal. But when he stepped too close, when he tried to place his hand on her shoulder, Willow pulled back. She had seen the file. She had seen everything. And she knew now that love had never been part of Drew's plan, only control. Before he could trap her, Michael arrived with Anna and Carly. The house was raided. Drew tried to run, but it was over. The files were recovered. The story leaked. And Port Charles, once again, was forced to confront just how deep the damage ran beneath its surface. In the end, Willow didn't collapse. She didn't run. She stood in front of the press, in front of the town, and told the truth. She admitted to following Daisy, to losing herself in fear, and to surviving something that had tried to break her from the inside out. Her confession was not one of weakness, but of power. Of reclaiming control. Michael stayed by her side. Carly watched with quiet pride. And Drew, now imprisoned under charges the WSB could no longer ignore, was left in the dark. But the scars remained. And somewhere out there, Daisy still lingered. Whether as a victim, a witness, or something else entirely. No one knew. And Willow, now stronger than ever, was ready for whatever came next.